Tell me about a project in which you were disappointed with your personal performance.
In my last job for a manufacturing company, I had to analyze all of the supplier bids and present recommendations to the vice president of logistics. Because the supplier bids weren't in a uniform format, my analysis often consisted of comparing dissimilar items. This caused some confusion in my final report, and by the time I'd reworked it and presented it to the vice president, we'd lost the critical time we needed to improve our approval process for these bids. In hindsight, I should have taken a simpler approach to the problem and not tried to make it so complex or all-inclusive. Ever since, I've paid more attention to making recommendations in a timely manner.
Describe roadblocks and what you've done to try to get around them. How have your skills come into play? In hindsight, what could you have done differently? What lessons have you learned? What would you do if I told you that I thought you were giving a very poor interview today?
Well, the first thing I'd do is ask you if there was any specific part of the interview that you thought I might have mishandled. After that, I'd think back and try to remember if there had been any faulty communication on my part. Then, I'd try to review possible problems I had understanding your questions, and I'd ask for clarification if I needed it. Finally, if we had time, I'd try to respond more fully and appropriately to the problem areas you identified for me.
Interviewers like to ask stress questions like these to see how well you hold up under pressure. Your best bet is to stay calm and relaxed. Don't allow your confidence to be shaken. Tell me about your most difficult work or personal experience.
One time my coworker went through rehab for 6 months after a wreck, and I picked up a lot of additional work to help him out. I know he would have done the same for me, and it's important for me to have that kind of trust among the members of my work group.
The interviewer will want to know how you hold up under pressure. Describe a situation, either personal or professional, that involved a great deal of conflict and challenge and placed you under an unusual amount of stress. What specifically were the problems, and what did you do to resolve them? If this were your first annual review with our company, what would I be telling you right now?
You'd be thanking me for a job well done, and would be explaining how you look forward to continuing to see good work from me. Furthermore, I would anticipate your explaining how you really appreciated my putting in extra time on some key projects, and how my creative thinking helped come up with some innovative solutions to existing problems.
For this question, you obviously want to present a positive impression. I wish you'd show up on time more is definitely not a good answer. Remember to focus on one or two of your key strengths based on the personal themes you've developed. Give an example of a time when you were asked to accomplish a task but weren't given enough information. How did you resolve this problem?
At my last internship, my supervisor, an account executive, asked me to assemble 500 press kits for a mailing. I wasn't sure in what order the pages and press releases should go, but my supervisor had already left for a client meeting. Afraid of putting the information together in the wrong order, I managed to track down her cell phone number and called her in her car. She explained the order of the materials over the phone, and in the end I managed to prevent a mistake that would have cost hours of work and a delay in the mailing, not to mention a few headaches.
Although this example may seem trivial, the candidate demonstrates maturity and an ability to approach work conceptually. The interviewer will want to know that you understand that just getting the job isn't enough. Your response should show resourcefulness and initiative. Describe a time when you failed to resolve a conflict.
I wasn't able to keep a good employee once who'd been in our manufacturing facility for 10 years. His job description was rewritten to require computer skills. I offered to send him to night classes, but he refused the help. I had no option but to replace him. In retrospect, if I'd encouraged him and other employees to acquire new training periodically, he might not have been overwhelmed by the time his position was reworked. Now I'm vigilant about encouraging my group to attend seminars and courses to enhance their job skills and to avoid becoming outdated.
The ideal solution here is to discuss a conflict that wasn't yours to solve in the first place. If you must discuss a personal conflict, focus on the positive steps you'd take if you could go back and do it all over again. What would you have learned as a result of this experience? What aspects of your work are most often criticized?
I remember in my first job as marketing assistant, I spent endless hours analyzing a particular problem. I came up with a revised marketing plan that was extremely well received. Unfortunately, when it came time to present the plan to top management, I hadn't prepared the fine points of the presentation, overheads and slides, and the proposal was turned down. I'd failed to make clear the savings that would result from the plan. I spent the next 2 weeks working on my presentation, and on my second try, management approved it, and my recommendations were carried out to everyone's satisfaction.
This question is similar to the question on weaknesses. Try to give an example from an early job. Discuss what you did to overcome the situation and to improve your work. You could also discuss how the failure has inspired you to pay more careful attention to detail in all of your work. What might your current boss want to change about your work habits?
I'm a morning person and she's a night owl. I like to come into the office at least an hour early, usually by 7, to get a jump start on my work. My boss likes to come in after 9 and work late into the evening. So I think if she could change one thing about me, she'd probably make me into a night owl too, so that I'd be available during many of the same hours she likes to work.
The interviewer will want to know how you'll fit in with your future boss and coworkers, and will also want to feel confident that he or she has uncovered any surprises about your corporate style. One good way to answer this question is to point out minor differences of preference. Alternatively, you might describe a weakness that you and your boss have worked on and improved. Tell me about a situation that frustrated you at work.
I was frustrated once when one of my clients, who'd insisted on a high-growth stock, called in a panic because the stock price had dropped more than 20 points in one day. I had a hard time convincing him to ride it out rather than cut his losses. This happened despite my attempts from the beginning to explain the short-term volatility of that stock.
This is another question designed to probe the candidate's professional personality. The interviewer will want reassurance that you're able to hold up under pressure. Describe how you've remained diplomatic, objective, or professional in a difficult situation. Tell me about one of your projects that failed.
I've always had the tendency to be a workaholic and have the attitude that I can tackle anything and achieve good results. During the hurricane of 1992, my insurance company was inundated with claims. I immediately thought I could handle all the claims in my area and jumped in with both feet to work 18-hour days. I quickly realized, though, that there was no way I could complete all of the claims on time, and I had to start to delegate some of the responsibility to my investigators. This experience showed me that no matter how efficient and competent you are, there are times when you must either delegate responsibility or ask for help.
Demonstrate the ability here to be humble and to learn from your mistakes. In hindsight, what could you have done differently? How has your leadership style changed because of the experience? Tell me about a time when your employer wasn't happy with your job performance.
That would be during my first week on the job as a paralegal. I gave her 2 letters that had typos in them. Frankly, I'd simply been a little sloppy. But that's the only example that comes to mind. Ms. Heilman did tell me regularly that she was very happy with my work.
Again, be sure to discuss a relatively minor incident here. Also, show a willingness to accept responsibility for the problem. Don't blame others or make excuses. Simply describe what happened and how you successfully resolved the situation. Have you ever been passed up for a promotion that you felt you deserved?
A couple of times in my early career, I thought that I was unfairly passed up for a promotion. However, in retrospect, I now realize that in all likelihood, I wasn't ready to perform in those jobs. And in fact, the additional training experience I gained remaining where I was proved invaluable in the last few years, as I've made significant progress moving up the corporate ladder. I've also learned to appreciate that being ready for a promotion doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen. There are many external factors that influence the nature and timing of promotions, aside from a person's performance and capabilities.
The interviewer wants to gauge the candidate's self-confidence as well as his or her objectivity about personal or professional limitations. Give evidence here that you have enough patience to learn what's important before you get bored or frustrated. After you've mastered your own job, would you stay motivated long enough to be productive? Have you ever been fired?
During one of my summer internships while in college, I worked for a software consulting company. Midway through the summer, a new president was appointed because of some financial difficulties, and he requested the resignation of my entire group. I was swept out with everyone else, even though my work performance had never been criticized.
If you've never been fired, of course, this is a simple question to answer. But what if you have been fired? You'll need to prepare to discuss the situation in detail and possibly answer a series of very specific follow-up questions. If the termination was a result of a situation beyond your control, such as corporate downsizing, most interviewers will be very understanding. But if you were fired due to poor performance or some other problem, you'll need to admit your fault and convince the interviewer that you've corrected the problem. Although this may be a difficult question to answer, you should be completely honest. If you aren't, and the recruiter finds out as much from your references, you may be subject to immediate dismissal or your job offer may be revoked. Why have you changed jobs so frequently?
My frequent job changes over the last 5 years have been due to the rapid changes in my profession. My jobs have been based on government contracts, and over the last several years, congressional appropriations have been up and down, causing some companies' contracts to be canceled, while other companies land huge, unexpected contracts. This volatility creates some good opportunities, but it also creates a lot of uncertainty. Because your business is based mostly on consumer products and not on government products, I welcome the opportunity to work in an environment where the business cycle is more stable and predictable.
Be candid here. Personal growth, a larger budget, or other career-enhancing experiences are all valid reasons for moving on. Convince the interviewer that you're interested in his or her company for the long haul. Why did you stay in your last job so long?
I was in my last job over 7 years. During that time, I completed an advanced technical degree and also had 2 6-month assignments in which I was loaned out to different departments. As a result, I acquired some additional skills that normally aren't associated with that particular job. Therefore, I think I've made good progress and am ready to accept the next challenge.
The interviewer may be curious about your interest in personal improvement, tackling new assignments, and so on. He or she may also be concerned about whether you have a tendency to get too comfortable with the status quo. Demonstrate how you've developed job responsibilities in meaningful new ways. Tell me about a problem you've had getting along with a work associate.
I'm pretty easygoing and tend to get along with most people. But I remember one time when we brought in a new associate who was very bossy, to the point where he offended one of our interns with his attitude. I actually pulled him aside and told him that I found it more productive to ask people for help than to give orders. Unfortunately, my advice didn't seem to help much, but we were more careful when we hired new staff after that.
Avoid discussing a personality clash. Focus instead on a difference in work ethic between you and an associate. For example, you might describe someone whose standards of excellence were perhaps less stringent than yours. Who's the toughest employer you've ever had, and why?
That would be Miss Henson at Franklin Associates. She'd push people to their limits when things got busy, and she was a stickler for detail. But she was always fair, and she rewarded good hard work. I'd call her a tough boss, but a good boss.
Again, you should avoid making negative statements about your previous employers at all costs. Turn the question around with a positive, upbeat response, as this candidate does. Time management has become a necessary factor in productivity. Give an example of a time management skill you've learned and applied at work.
I regularly use scheduling software, which helps me effectively plan for the day, week, month, or year. It also has a to-do list feature and an alarm option, which is helpful for meeting timely deadlines. In general, though, I'm very goal-oriented and self-disciplined. I like to focus clearly on one project at a time for a set amount of hours. In the past, I've found that this has helped me save time, which in turn has given me the opportunity to implement new procedures that have ultimately saved the department time and money.
When answering this question, describe a time management technique you've applied at work that's allowed you to save time and resources. In such areas as public relations, time is precious, and the interviewer will want to see that you have an idea of how valuable your time is. Try to give an example that demonstrates how you've managed to increase productivity because of effective time management. How do you handle tension with your boss?
The only tension I've ever felt was once when we both got too busy to keep each other informed. My boss overcommitted me with a short deadline, not knowing that I was bogged down with another client problem. I believe firmly in the importance of staff meetings so that co-workers can respect the demands on each other's time.
The safest ground here is to describe an example of miscommunication in your early relationship with a boss and how you resolved it. The interviewer will want to know how you avoided a reoccurrence of the problem. What is your current salary?
I currently earn an annual salary of $35,000 with full benefits.
By all means, if you're asked about your salary history, don't embellish. More and more companies are starting to verify applicants' pay history, some even demanding to see W-2 forms from job seekers. If you get the job, a falsehood discovered even years later may be grounds for immediate dismissal. Don't leave yourself open to this kind of trouble. Would you be willing to relocate to another city?
I'd prefer to be based here, but it's certainly a possibility I'd be willing to consider.
You may, even in some first interviews, be asked questions that seem to elicit a tremendous commitment on your behalf, such as this one. Although such questions may be unfair during an initial job interview, you may well conclude that you have nothing to gain and everything to lose with a negative response. If you're asked such a question unexpectedly during an initial job interview, simply say something like, "That's certainly a possibility," or, "I'm willing to consider that." Later, if you receive an offer, you can find out the specific work conditions and then decide if you wish to accept the position. Remember, at the job offer stage you have the most negotiating power and the employer may be willing to accommodate your needs. If that isn't the case, you might wish to explain that upon reflection, you've decided you can't relocate, but that you'd like to be considered for other positions that might open up in the future. Does the frequent travel required for this work fit into your lifestyle?
The frequent travel in this consulting position is no problem for me or my family. My husband is an airline flight attendant, so neither of us follows the typical 9-to-5 routine.
If you're comfortable divulging information about your family situation, now is the time to do so. The interviewer is concerned here that the candidate might not be able to travel as much as the job requires. Emphasize your flexibility or explain why travel wouldn't be a problem in order to alleviate these concerns. Sell me this stapler.
This is a professional quality stapler, designed to be functional as well as attractive. It will help you reduce clutter on your desk by enabling you to fasten pages together. And since papers relating to the same subject will now be attached, you'll be more efficient and will save time searching for papers. Finally, its sleek shape and black color were coordinated to match the rest of your office furniture.
With this kind of question, the interviewer will want to determine how quickly you can think on your feet, as well as your ability to communicate effectively and succinctly. Be prepared to give a 30-second speech on the benefits and advantages of virtually any common office object, from a paperclip to a telephone, particularly if you're interviewing for a sales position. Prove to me that your interest is sincere.
I know that a lot of people want to get into television because of the money, or because they just want to be on camera. But to me, communicating well is an art, and the television industry is the ultimate test of how well one communicates. Working in television isn't like working for a newspaper, where if a reader misses a fact, he or she can just go back and reread it. A television news story can go by in a flash, and the challenge is to make sure the audience understands it, learns from it, and in a broader sense, can use the information to better their lives or their situations. It's the way television can evoke action that's always made me want to be a part of the industry. I'm particularly interested in this station because I like your focus on the community. Though the on-air products have a great 90s look, it's to your credit that the station seems to remain focused on the tradition of local news and what matters to its audience. The special reports that emphasize town politics, that go on location each week to a different town for a live shot, that explain the big issues facing a community, make the viewer feel that the station is a part of the community. In my opinion, this is a great way to maintain a loyal audience.
Being unprepared to answer this question can eliminate you from further consideration. On the other hand, if you're able to demonstrate a strong interest in the company and in the position, you'll have an advantage over the competition. Tell me about yourself.
I'm a production assistant with a BA in communications and 3 years of solid broadcasting and public relations experience. I have extensive experience developing and researching topics, pre-interviewing guests, and producing on-location videotapings. I have a tremendous amount of energy and love to be challenged. I'm constantly trying to take on additional responsibilities and learn new things. I've been watching your station for some time now, and have been impressed with your innovative approach and your fast growth. I'd like to be a part of that winning team.
This is a perfect opportunity to sell your qualifications to the interviewer. Using the 60-second pitch you developed in Chapter 1 as a guideline, briefly describe your experience, skills, accomplishments, goals, and personal qualities. Explain your interest in the company you're interviewing with and how you plan on making a contribution there. If you're a recent college graduate, be sure to discuss your educational qualifications as well, emphasizing the specific classes you took that are relevant to the position. What is your biggest weakness?
I admit to being a bit of a perfectionist. I take a great deal of pride in my work, and am committed to producing the highest quality work I can. Sometimes, if I'm not careful, though, I can go a bit overboard. I've learned that it's not always possible or even practical to try to perfect your work. Sometimes you have to decide what's important and ignore the rest in order to be productive. It's a question of trade-offs. I also pay a lot of attention to pacing my work, so that I don't get too caught up in perfecting every last detail.
This is a great example of what's known as a negative question. Negative questions are a favorite among interviewers because they're effective for uncovering problems or weaknesses. The key to answering negative questions is to give them a positive spin. For this particular question, your best bet is to admit to a weakness that isn't inconsistent or currently disruptive to your chosen professional field, and emphasize how you've overcome or minimized the problem. Whatever you do, don't answer this question with a cop-out like, "I can't think of any," or even worse, "I don't really have any major weaknesses." This kind of response is likely to eliminate you from contention. You've got 7 minutes to convince me why you're the best candidate for this position. Go. Instead of following a traditional question-and-answer format for a job interview, some recruiters have been known to ask no more than this one question. Only the most prepared candidates will survive this type of interview. If you run into this question, your best bet is to discuss the various sales themes you developed in Chapter 1, emphasizing one or two of your strongest qualifications for the position. How would you respond to a defaulted Form Z65 counter-derivative renewal request if your manager ordered you to do so, and if the policy under which the Executive Board resolves these issues was currently under review? Sometimes recruiters ask seemingly impossible questions just to see how you'll respond. It's not so much that they want to see you squirm in your seat, as that they want to judge how you might respond to pressure or tension on the job. No matter how you may feel at the time, being subjected to a ridiculous question like this one is probably a very good sign. If you're asked a tough question that you simply can't answer, think about it for a few seconds. Then, with a confident smile and without apology, simply say something like, "I don't know, but if you hire me, I'll sure find out for you." Special situations. Interviewing can be even more stressful when you find yourself in what we call a special situation. Perhaps you lack paid job experience, have been out of the workplace to raise children, are concerned about possible discrimination because of age or disability, or are trying to enter a field in which you have no practical work experience. Not to worry. The key to improving your chances in an interview is to emphasize your strengths. Focus on your marketable skills and highlight impressive achievements, relevant education and training, and/or related interests. And of course, you should take care to downplay or eliminate any information that may be construed as a weakness. For example, if you are a displaced homemaker, that is, a homemaker entering the job market for the first time, you can highlight the special skills you've acquired over the years while downplaying your lack of paid job experience. Questions for students and recent graduates. Whether you're graduating from high school or college, those of you with little or no work history face the same dilemma. It's tough to get a job without experience, and it seems impossible to gain experience without getting hired. But, as you'll see, there are always ways to get around this problem by emphasizing your strengths and educational achievements. Why weren't your grades better?
School was a wonderful experience for me. I really enjoyed learning new ideas. I studied consistently, and I was attentive in class. But I never believed in cramming before the night of an exam just to get a higher grade, or staying up all night to finish a term paper. I really believe I learned just as much as many students who went for the grades.
It's likely that if you've made it to the interview stage, you fulfill the basic criteria for the position, including the education requirements. The recruiter is probably trying to judge here how well the candidate handles adversity. It's important not to get defensive or to place blame. Instead, try to put a positive spin on the question. For example, by concentrating on what you learned and the extra effort you put in, rather than on the grades you received. Was there a course that you found particularly challenging?
Initially, I was completely overwhelmed by the introductory chemistry course that I took last year. No matter how hard I studied, I seemed to be getting nowhere. I failed the first 3 quizzes. So I tried a new approach. Instead of just studying by myself, I asked a friend who's a chemistry major to help me with my studies. I also began seeking help from the professor after class. And I found that more time spent in the lab was critical. I ended up with a B+ in the course, and thought I achieved a solid understanding of the material. More than that, I learned that tackling a new field of study sometimes requires a new approach, not just hard work, and that the help of others can be crucial.
The interviewer will want to see how well you respond to difficult situations. Demonstrate that you won't fold in the face of difficulty and that you're willing to put in the extra effort to meet a challenge. Why didn't you participate more in extracurricular activities?
I wanted to give as much effort as possible to my studies. I came from a high school in a very small town where I received a lot of A's, but this didn't prepare me very well for college. So I studied very hard. I have, however, found time to explore the city and make new friends, and I do socialize informally on weekends.
The interviewer may be worried that if you don't have many outside interests, you may eventually suffer from burnout. Employers like candidates who are well-rounded and have interests outside of work. If you didn't participate in formal extracurricular activities in college, you still may want to talk about some of your interests, such as reading or exercising, that you participated in on a more informal level. For instance, you may have a passion for running even if you weren't on the college track team. Questions for career changers. For those of you who've devoted your careers exclusively to one profession or industry, work experience really isn't an issue. You've got lots of experience, but none of it relates to your current job objective. No problem. Instead of emphasizing your job history, you'll just have to emphasize the skills you've acquired that apply to the job you're seeking. For example, let's say your career has been in real estate and, in your spare time, you like to run in marathons. Recently, you heard about an opening in the sales and marketing department at an athletic shoe manufacturer. What you need to do is emphasize the skills you have that the employer is looking for. Not only do you have strong sales experience, you're familiar with the needs of the company's market, and that's a powerful combination. Why do you want to leave your current position?
I've learned quite a bit about the plastics industry in my current position, and am very glad to have had the opportunities I've had at Fisk Incorporated. However, I found that my interests really lie in research and development, which Fisk has recently decided to phase out over the next 2 years. And that's why I'm so interested in this organization, because, as I understand, Randy Corporation places a great deal of emphasis on R&D, and is also a highly respected leader in the industry.
The interviewer's foremost concern with career changers will always be why they want to switch careers. Show the interviewer that your decision has been based on careful consideration. Explain why you decided upon this particular position, as well as how the position will allow you to further your natural skills and interests. Why would you want to leave an established career at an employment agency for an essentially entry-level position in marketing?
I've enjoyed my work at the agency and have gained many valuable skills from it. At the same time, however, I feel as if I've stopped growing. I'm no longer challenged by my work. I've thought about this for a long time, and I'm confident that it's time for a change. As for my interest in marketing, last year my teenage children and some of the other neighborhood kids decided to design and sell T-shirts to benefit a local family who'd lost their home to a fire. I pitched in by designing and distributing posters, placing advertisements in local newspapers, and selling shirts outside grocery stores and shopping malls. At first, I really didn't give the project a lot of thought, but when I saw the fruits of my labor, I began to get very excited about it. I learned that you can have a great product and a great cause. But if nobody knows about it, you're dead in the water. I finally felt as if I was making a difference. And I was good at it, too. Since then, I've taken 2 introductory marketing courses and am planning to enroll in a part-time degree program this fall. Furthermore, I'll be able to use many of the skills and abilities I've gained at the employment agency in the marketing field. After all, working for an employment agency is marketing. Marketing the agency to corporate clients and job seekers, and marketing job seekers to corporate clients.
The interviewer is trying to determine 2 things: the candidate's motivation for choosing a new career, and the likelihood that the candidate will be comfortable in a position where he or she will probably have less power and responsibility than in previous jobs. To dispel the interviewer's fears, discuss your reasons for switching careers. and be sure to show that you have a solid understanding of the position and the industry in general. Many candidates expect to start their new careers in a job comparable to the one they held previously. But the truth is that most career changers must start in lower, if not entry-level positions in their new company to gain basic experience and knowledge of the field. Questions for candidates re-entering the job market. There's no doubt about it. You've been out of the workforce for a while, and you're facing some troubling issues. You may be feeling anxious, wondering if you still got what it takes to make it out there. The key element for you is to make sure all of your skills are up to date. If they aren't, you should consider retraining, which might mean learning a new computer program or taking a class at the local college. If your skills are current, not to worry. What you'll need to emphasize is your previous job experience and skills, ways you've kept up to date during your leave, reading trade journals, doing freelance work, attending seminars, and the skills you've learned at home that can be transferred to the workplace. Your resume doesn't list any job experience in the past few years. Why not?
I took 5 years off to raise my son, Jason, who's now in kindergarten. It was a difficult decision for me, but at the time, I decided I wouldn't be able to commit myself 100% to my career with such tremendous responsibilities at home. And I didn't think it would be fair to my employer to give any less than my complete and total commitment. I believe it was the right decision for me at the time, but now I feel refreshed and ready to devote myself full-time to my career.
Whatever the reason for your hiatus, be honest. Discuss the decisions behind your absence, whether they were to stay home and raise a family or to recuperate from a debilitating injury. Tell the interviewer why you're now ready to return to work. Most important, emphasize your eagerness to resume your career. I see you've been out of work for a while. What difficulties have you had in finding a job that's compatible with your interests?
It's true that I've been out of my field for the last 4 years, but I've had a number of tempting offers to jump back in. However, I thought it was important to stay home with my new baby and also continue a part-time family business, which I ran out of our home while my husband was completing law school. Now that that's behind us, I'm ready to return to my career in the entertainment industry.
The real question behind the interviewer's curiosity here is why someone else hasn't taken this candidate off the market. Why isn't the candidate in greater demand? Is he or she being too unrealistic or perhaps going after random positions? Is there something in the job seeker's past that others have discovered? You'll need to alleviate such concerns by frankly discussing your situation. Be sure to emphasize how you remained involved in your career during your sabbatical, as well as your eagerness to rejoin the workforce. Your resume indicates that you've been working for the past 2 years as a part-time clerk at reliable insurance brokers. How will this experience help you in your banking career?
Reliable was in the process of computerizing its files, and I was hired primarily to check the computerized files for accuracy vis-a-vis the manual files. I recorded premium payments, prepared bank deposits, and sorted payables. Not only did this work help me keep my accounting skills current, I also learned valuable computer skills that will certainly help me become even more efficient and productive in my next position in banking.
The interviewer may be concerned here that the candidate is simply applying for any available job, rather than for a specific position in a specific field. Explain how your experience relates to the position you're applying for, and discuss any skills you've gained that are transferable to the position and company. Illegal interview questions. Illegal interview questions probe into your private life or personal background. Federal law forbids employers from discriminating against any person on the basis of sex, age, race, national origin, or religion. For instance, an interviewer may not ask you about your age or your date of birth. However, he or she may ask you if you're over 18 years of age. If you're asked an illegal question at a job interview, keep in mind that many employers simply don't know what's legal and illegal. One strategy is to try to discover the concerns behind the question and then address them. For instance, if the employer asks you about your plans to have children, he or she may be concerned that you won't be able to fulfill the travel requirements of the position. Sexist? You bet. But it's to your advantage to try to alleviate those concerns. Try to get at the heart of the issue behind the question by saying something like, "I'm not quite sure I understand what you're getting at. Would you please explain to me how this issue is relevant to the position?" Once the interviewer's real concerns are on the table, you can allay those concerns by saying something like, "I'm very interested in developing my career. Travel is definitely not a problem for me. In fact, I enjoy it tremendously. Now let me direct your attention to my experience and expertise in..." Alternatively, you may choose to answer the question or to gracefully point out that this question is illegal and decline to respond. Avoid reacting in a hostile fashion. Remember, you can always decide later to decline a job offer. Part 3. After the interview. Chapter 6. Clinching the deal. You've made it through the toughest part, but now what? First, breathe a sigh of relief. Then, as soon as you've left the interview site, write down your thoughts about the interview while they're still fresh in your mind. Ask yourself these key questions. What does the position entail? What do you like and dislike about the position and the company? Did you make any mistakes or have trouble answering any of the questions? Did you feel you were well prepared? If not, what could you do to improve your performance in the future? Carefully consider all of these questions. If you find that your performance was lacking, work to improve it. Be sure to record the name and the title of the person you interviewed with, as well as the names and titles of anyone else you may have met. Ideally, you'll have collected their business cards. Don't forget to write down what the next agreed-upon step will be. Will the recruiter contact you? How soon? Writing your follow-up letter. It's fair to say that follow-up letters won't necessarily help you secure the job, but not sending one will most certainly hurt your chances. You should write a follow-up letter immediately after each interview you have, ideally within 24 hours. The letter should be brief, no more than a page, and personalized. In your letter, you should be sure to express your appreciation for the opportunity to interview with the recruiter, express your continued enthusiasm about the position in the company, recap your strengths, being careful to relate them to the requirements of the job in the company, and request to meet again. Allow the interviewer 5 to 10 business days to contact you after receiving your letter. If you still haven't heard anything after that time, you should follow up with a phone call. Express your continued interest in the firm and the position, and inquire as to whether or not a decision has been made or when you'll be notified. In the meantime, it's important to keep your candidacy fresh in the interviewer's mind. If the conversation during the interview provided any possibilities for follow-up, such as reading an article or a book, drop a note to the interviewer mentioning how much you learned from that piece. Or if you discovered during the interview that you share common interests with the interviewer, such as sailing or rock climbing, consider sending the person a great article you just found on that topic. Not only will this ensure that you don't get lost in the shuffle, it will help you establish a sense of camaraderie with the interviewer. Though this technique won't guarantee you the position, it certainly can hurt if it gets the interviewer in your corner. Taking the next step. Don't be discouraged if you don't receive an immediate response from the employer. Most companies interview many applicants before making a final decision. Take advantage of this time to contact other firms and to schedule more interviews, so that if a rejection does come, you've got other options open. Continuing to job hunt and to interview will have been a good idea even if you end up receiving the job offer. Ultimately, you may have a number of opportunities to choose from, and you'll be in a better position to negotiate terms. If you place too much importance on a single interview, not only are you bound to be unduly disappointed if the offer doesn't come through, but you'll be wasting valuable time and energy. So keep plugging away. Handling rejection. Rejection is inevitable, and it's bound to happen to you just as it happens to all other job hunters. The key is to be prepared for it and not to take it personally. One way you can turn rejection around is by contacting each person who sends you a rejection letter. Thank your contact for considering you for the position and request that he or she keep you in mind for future openings. If you feel comfortable, you may want to ask the person for suggestions to help you improve your chances of getting a job in that industry, or for names of people who might be looking for someone with your skills. You may want to say something like, "What would you do in my situation? Whom would you call?" 2 cautions are in order. First, don't ask employers to tell you why they didn't hire you. Not only will this place a recruiter in a very awkward position, you'll probably get a very negative reaction. Second, keep in mind that if you contact employers solely for impartial feedback, not everyone will be willing to talk to you. A well-written thank you note, mailed within 1 or 2 days of receiving notice of rejection, makes a positive statement. In your letter, emphasize an ongoing interest in being considered for future openings. Also, be very careful to use an upbeat tone. Although you may be disappointed, you don't want to put the employer on the defensive or imply that you don't respect his or her decision. Above all, don't give up. Stay positive and motivated, and learn from the process. Success could be right around the corner.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the 250 job interview questions you'll most likely be asked by Peter Veruki. For a complete catalog of other fine audiobooks, please call 1-800-653-9400. This has been a Listen and Live audio production. If you like this audiobook, don't miss our recent release, The Golden Rule of Schmoozing.
Welcome to the wide, wide world of schmoozing. You've just picked up this book because you're either a schmoozer already or you're a wannabe. Either way, the world is better off because of you. You're the one who probably has an inkling that the world desperately needs schmoozers. You're the one who has enough sense to start the ball rolling toward a saner, less caustic society. And you're the one I want to talk with, because you're curious enough to have opened a book that could very well make a difference in your life and give us global peace. By the way, if you haven't figured it out by now, I was just schmoozing you.